Welcome to this week's Treasury Career Corner podcast, where I interview Treasury professionals about their Treasury careers. Each and every week, I talk to treasurers about how they built their careers, where they are now, where they see both themselves and the Treasury profession going to next. And a special thanks to Flywire, our fantastic sponsors. If you've ever wondered whether there was a way to ease your international transaction hassles, they're the guys to talk to. If you follow the link in our show notes, you can see me talking to my mate Greg Levin, their Senior VP of Sales. I get to ask Greg about who are Flywire and how they can help you and your Treasury team with your cross-border payment headaches. Just follow the link to the interview in today's show notes. And now, let's get on with the show. In this week's show, I'm joined by Eugene Spevakov, the treasurer at 6 Cents Insights, a Series E SaaS company where he has been instrumental in steering the company through significant growth phases for the past 2 years. Eugene manages key financial functions, including treasury, corporate FP&A, and accounts payable. He's got many years of experience. I saw Eugene recently on LinkedIn, so he gave me an interview. I thought, great, let's get this amazing guy on the podcast. So thrilled to be joined by Eugene today. And we were just talking before the show. And your interest in Treasury, sometimes we go back to the beginning of people's careers, but you actually started, Eugene, with your interest in Treasury a little bit earlier than most. So over to you, sir. Maybe your origin story, if you would. Over to you.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Mike. I'm very excited to be here. Very appreciative of you inviting me to this podcast. And I look forward to our discussion today. Yeah, I do have a story. I grew up in the Soviet Union. And back then, the Soviet Union currency, the ruble, was not something that was easily convertible. And when I was 13, we traveled abroad. I used to play this game called Go, and we traveled to Yugoslavia. Back then, there was Yugoslavia. We traveled to a European championship. And what the rules of travel in the Soviet Union were, if you do travel, if you're a legitimate business reason or a legitimate purpose to travel, once a year, you are allowed to exchange your rubles into the foreign currency. Normally, the citizens could not exchange the rubles to any currency, but you could exchange it if you had legitimate travel, very limited amount. I'm guessing the government of the Soviet Union didn't want the citizens to starve on the trips, but they did allow them to exchange rubles for hard currency. And at the same time, the ruble itself was fairly worthless, but the government did not want to admit it. The government wanted to pretend that the currency was actually worth something. So they set an official exchange rate that was much, much higher than the actual value of the ruble. As a matter of fact, there was a joke going around in the old Soviet Union. What's the exchange rate between the ruble, the dollar, and the pound? And the answer is $1 is worth 1 pound of dried rubles. It wasn't that bad, but the government allowed you to exchange your rubles into dollars at a very preferential rate, the rate that they wanted to have officially, but the amount was limited. So I'm 13 years old. We're about to travel, very excited. And I know that we can exchange a certain amount of rubles to dollars that can be later exchanged to Yugoslavian dinars. And I'm trying to figure out how much dollars are you going to get for these rubles. And there was actually an exchange rate published, an official exchange rate published in the newspaper once a week. And I would look it up. And I was fascinated. I couldn't quite comprehend why 1 week you get one amount of dollars for your rubles, and next week it's a different amount. And the amount goes up and down through no fault and merit of your own. So that's how I got exposure to foreign exchange rates and their fluctuations. And then I tried to understand a little bit better plus the various economic drivers. And at that time, I thought everybody wanted to have strong currency because it represented the strength of the economy. But yeah, it's something that I never thought of before. Probably most 13-year-olds never given out a thought to, but I was exposed to it and it fascinated me. I'd say another lesson that I got in maybe not treasury, but economics was when we actually went to Yugoslavia. And by the way, Yugoslavia was like a commonwealth of several states and republics. Today, the main part is Serbia. We go there and the country is going through a period of hyperinflation. And I lived through inflation, but this was very different.
Every day.
Yeah, it was like, and that was a period, I don't know how long it lasted, but people's behavior changes in hyperinflation environment. First of all, we visited some homes there, and you have like bags of grains and stuff. Like we asked, why do you store so much? Because as soon as somebody gets cash, on a few days, it loses value so rapidly, it's worth to just go out and purchase things. So it drives consumer behavior in a very different way. Second thing that was very amazing, you go in a store and you have stickers of how much things cost. And for every item, pretty much every item, it has probably half a dozen to a dozen stickers because the price changes so often. Every day, every other day, store clerks need to go in there and put the new sticker on the price. So that was very interesting, the economic dynamics, and I got exposed to it when I was 13. Not exactly maybe Treasury, but it shaped my thinking and
you got you thinking about it got you thinking about finance and treasury and at that early stage. So then education wise, what happened with you and what happened from there?
Yeah. So like a lot of folks in my family, I went into engineering. So it's nothing connected to that previous experience. And I go to engineering and I'm following my passion, and I wanted to do something with environment. And that was mid 90s, late 90s. So instead of going into something that connected .com, I go completely different route. I go to civil engineering, which I don't regret by any means, but it was a different path than most kind of folks followed at the time. I finished my engineering degree. The first job I get, I do exactly what I learned in school, a lot of structural design. Got very boring, very old because I was doing the same design over and over again. The first few times it's great. When you do it 10, 20 times, then it gets a little boring.
It's lost his lackluster. It's not quite as interesting, I think. So yeah, you're doing the engineering design. But with that sort of, what's the word? Did you then, was it then, how come you were starting to think about the next move?
Yeah. So I'm actually, after the first job, I joined T also in engineering capacity, but more in a project management role to where I managed my projects and I designed my project and I did everything start to finish. I really got very interested and I got this passion for getting things, building things, managing things, getting things, not just, hey, I'm just the cog in a machine. I'm actually driving something. I had a responsibility for an area, actually geographic area and functional area within a small area, but within the company to make sure that the outside plan functions well. I really enjoyed that kind of start to finish management part of it, not just the design, but also the execution, coordination. I worked with other engineering teams. I worked with construction. I worked with customers. I worked with municipalities. So being in the middle of things and making things happen, that was very rewarding. And you can see things being built. I can drive around town. I can say, I did this project. I did that project. I could see it. But I didn't want to be complacent. I wanted to continue growing and learning things. So I pivoted and I went to business school. And while in business school, I really enjoyed a lot of finance courses, especially finance courses that deal with markets. I loved my derivatives class. It was actually, for one quarter, I was in Manchester, in the University of Manchester in business school. I took a class on banking, and that was a great class. We did a simulation. So I really liked finance because it was very analytical, similar to engineering. And I thought to myself, this is a very good career path I can build on the engineering experience and I can carry it on into finance. I was very fortunate. AT&T hired me back, but into their finance group, into something called finance leadership program. There was a rotational program. We do 3 rotations in 3 years. And I started with BU finance. And my very first rotation was an experience that I didn't expect at all. I started with AT&T. I'm excited. I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure something out. I'm going to help big company. I'm going to move the needle somewhere and make things better. And then I joined a BU that was for sunsetting business. There was long distance business. At the time, everybody was cutting cord and subscribers were going down. Actually, the size of the team, when I started, we had the 20 people in that group. When I left a year later, I think we had 3 or 4 people, including myself. It was a very good exposure to finance, to budgeting. For my second rotation, I got into a growing business unit. It was more exciting. It was U-verse. Things are growing fast, so it was very different. But for my third rotation, and the rule was you have to do 1 rotation at the headquarters. And I was in California, headquarters in Texas. And I say, well, Eugene, you need to come to Texas. I'm like, okay, which rotation do I want to get? I'm thinking, like, I would like a role that's connected to the market, that's more externally focused, that kind of utilizes some of the curriculum that I'm learning here in a CFA institute. And it's not the budgeting part. It's got to be something that's connected to markets. Treasury was the natural answer. I said, I want Treasury. Let me go to Treasury and see. That's where things happening, like on the grand scale. And I got to Texas, and that was it. Treasury was this big nerve center. 3 months after I got there, was 2008. Lehman collapsed, and Treasury was it was the front row seat.
And you joined, obviously, you're doing your rotation. You're right at the bottom of the Treasury. How was Treasury structured there at AT&T at the time?
Yeah, so Treasury was pretty much mostly in a corporate office. There was a little bit of decentralized part and some BUs that would feed in some data, but Treasury was mainly in Texas.
And a big team?
Was that
a big team, a big group, or?
Yeah, so it's a big team, and it's not that big team. The Treasury, if you look at the head count under Treasury, it was, I think, 600 or 700 people. And you said, whoa, why are there so many people in Treasury? And the reason is cash management was part of Treasury, and part of cash management was receiving payments, receiving people who mail checks. Somebody needs to open and process them. So a few hundred people.
Lockbox processing. It was all any touch point of cash. So what was real corporate Treasury as we might know it in there roughly?
Yes, I want to say it's probably 24 people or so. There was the capital markets team / FX team, and there was about, I think, 5-6 people. The core team that was in Dallas, I want to say it's maybe a couple dozen people. So still fairly large. Cash management team had several people there. There was, within capital markets, it was very debt heavy with interest rate hedging. There was a person that was doing CP, for example, CP issuance. So there was a specialist in a lot of these roles. It was fairly complex operation, and it was very, very centralized because everything was happening in there.
And you were there. It's your first role. You're on that rotation. It was a good thing for you. You're getting that. You're a Treasury specialist. You're right at the bottom of things. But in the big corporate, you're getting exposure to lots of stuff. What did that give you that you could use for the future, as it were? What were you able to do?
Yeah, let me tell another story. So I get into San Antonio in Texas, and there's another person that moved there from California that was a little bit more senior. And that my role was the extra pair of hands, the rotational guy, pick up different tasks. His role was to do FX. Now, FX was not huge for AT&T, but still, there were millions of dollars flowing through.
Their exposures.
And after he moved with his family to San Antonio, it didn't work out, and he decided to move back to California. So that position for FX, not trader, FX analyst, FX manager, it was vacant. And because FX was not huge, nobody was panicking. And I asked my manager, can I pick it up? Like, the vacant role, I'm here. I'm very flexible with what I do. Can I step into it? He thought about it and said, yeah, sure. Why not? So I actually got into a more specialized role right there and then, like within a month or two after doing my Treasury rotation, and I became the FX guy. And that later helped me to make my next move to be FX manager, Treasury manager at SanDisk a few years later, which was great. But it's a good foray into some kind of a specialty. It's also taught me that you don't necessarily need to have a background in something in order to be able to pick it up. You can learn things. It's incremental. It's adjacent. You can step into it. If you've done A, you can probably do B. Maybe going from A to Z is difficult, but going from A to B to C is very doable. And I think that's how a lot of folks' careers develop. They slowly expand and build on what they have.
And without wishing to advertise too much, you then moved to SanDisk. Now, for people that don't know, AT&T, everyone knows the global name. SanDisk, most people might know, but I was actually just looking there. There you go. That's just
there you go.
That's it. They do memory and everything else for your different devices and everything else. And a very big good customer. So feel free to send me some stuff. SanDisk is lovely. But so how did you make that move, or what happened next?
Yeah, so I was living in Texas, made that move over to AT&T. I was there for a couple of years. I wanted to come back to California, but my one boundary condition was I want to stay in Treasury. I'm like, I love Treasury. This is it. This is what I wanted to do. This is all my kind of interests and training and education. This is what I feel like hardcore finance within a corporation. That's where a lot of it happened. No offense to other areas of finance, but this is what I enjoyed. So I wanted to be in
we
Treasury.
don't need to be offensive, but they're not listening. That's the good thing.
Yeah.
So, only Treasury folk. Yeah. So we're not being offensive to others. And if you are listening from other areas, you're obviously listening because you want to get into Treasury. So it's okay. We're all right.
Yeah.
Like you can feel the Treasury love here on the podcast. So don't worry. So yeah. So yeah.
Great. So I tell people I changed companies, but I kept my job.
Yeah.
So I stayed in Treasury. I was lucky that SanDisk was looking for a Treasury manager to address some of their FX need. I get in there. Very interesting. The company, if you can do FX, SanDisk was the place to be.
Right.
Because SanDisk had a joint venture with Toshiba to produce most of the memory chips or to produce most of the memory.
We love them. Great thing.
But for a semiconductor company, if you actually have manufacturing, the core is those wafers. In these fabs were in Japan. Toshiba had slight majority ownership, so they were setting some of the rules. And one of the rules was that the products were denominated in Japanese yen. So SanDisk, a U.S. company that's operating in USD, now had to buy its core components, the wafers that made up most of their COGS, in Japanese yen. So I think at one point, like 50% of the COGS were denominated in Japanese yen. And that created a massive exposure to Japanese yen for SanDisk. And at that time, the yen was just on a tear. It was just getting stronger and stronger. And it would cause a lot of hardship from the financial perspective for SanDisk because it put a lot of pressure on the margin. And so the question was, how do you mitigate it? How do you deal with this risk? You can't change what the yen is trading at, right? But you could lock in and go a little bit further, a little shorter. You could at least give some certainty to the business by executing a
hedge
hedging
as much as
program.
you could.
Yeah. So I was very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. And it was very interesting to set up. I took a fresh look at the hedging program. We presented new proposal. It went all the way to CEO. It got approved. We started executing hedges. Went from somewhat sporadic hedging program to a very programmatic hedging program. And there's always second guessing. Should we bought this? Should we bought it this time or that time? But I'm trying to take this emotional piece out and just focus on just managing risk, reduce your risk. If FX is not your core business, don't take the risk there. Take the risk in your manufacturing process because that's where you get outside return. So that was a great role to get into, leverage FX skills and transition. But I didn't want to be a FX guy for the rest of my career.
Right.
And that was, I started seeing, okay, people look at you like, Eugene's very good at FX, but he hasn't done anything else. So we don't know, can he do other stuff? But I was fortunate even with SanDisk to get into this next adjacent areas, investments. So investments for SanDisk, we had several $1 billion on the balance sheet, about half a dozen asset managers. So that was also very exciting. Most companies, if they have a lot of money, they might have internal program. If they have very little money, they might not even bother with investments or just have a single asset manager. We had right there in between where we're not doing it in-house, but it's enough to where there were a lot of eyes on it. It was a big focus for the company.
Yeah.
And investors would ask us about it. So again, very visible, very interesting, and somewhat unique too, because SanDisk at the time had very high tax rate. So municipal bonds that are tax exempt were very attractive, yet most companies don't allocate a lot to municipal bonds. SanDisk did, and we always looked at it. It was very interesting to understand the asset classes deeper, talk to the asset managers, understand the dynamics of this corner of the market. It was great going from FX to FX and investment. It was very interesting, but also proved to myself that, okay, you can move from one area to the next and you can pick things up even if you did not know them before. It doesn't require specific training.
And that's also something I think the listeners need to, when you were doing that, were you pushing yourself to do that, or were others saying you need to do this, or where did that come from?
Yeah, I wanted to do this. Yeah, I did not, after doing FX for, I don't know, it's probably 3 years or so. I don't want to be the FX guy for the rest of my life. 3 years is great, but what if it's 5, 6, 7, right? Where do you go from there? So I really wanted to expand again within Treasury and something that's also adjacent. Investments was a great opportunity because it deals with markets, it deals with risk, different type of risk, and it also aligned with a lot of CFA curriculum that I've studied a few years earlier. So it was a perfect fit. So I really wanted to do that.
Yeah. And then one of the things that technology is a big, what's the word, a backbone of a lot of your career, if you like. And is that born out of the fact that there is so much technology and so many tech companies on the West Coast of the US that then the opportunities come up? Or was that also driven by your own to get the next role sort of thing? Or was that driven by you?
Yeah, it's probably a bit of both. I do want to acknowledge that being a tech company where there are a lot of things happening, a lot of changes happening is exciting, right? Change brings challenges, but also brings opportunities. And being in Treasury, when things are challenging, things are interesting. If things are the same day to day, then it gets boring. I'm the guy who likes the challenge. I'm the guy who likes to solve a problem. Yeah, being in tech is rewarding from a career perspective, make the job interesting. But also being on the West Coast, there are a lot of tech companies. There are a lot of semiconductor companies here. There are a lot of SaaS companies now here. Yeah, it's a little bit of both.
And so then talk us through the next couple of moves or the next couple of companies, if you like, because you did that role for a while and then it was Marvel Semiconductors. Who are they?
Yeah. So I had an opportunity to join Marvel. It's a broader role. It had FX, it had investments. It also picked up insurance, and it was a cash management component as well. Picking up insurance was very interesting because going from FX to investments, there are a lot of some commonalities. It's markets, it's risk, things move with fluctuations of the market. Insurance was very different. And insurance was somewhat daunting because when I first got in there, and by the way, that job was not like, hey, Eugene, do you really want insurance? Do you want to take it? It was more like, hey, here's the job. It includes insurance. And I'm like, that's great because I do want to learn it, but I have no idea about what I'm doing here.
What's insurance?
First. Yeah. And the daunting part about insurance was it has its own lingo. And when everybody speaks one language and you don't understand the language, it makes things very difficult. The way I did two things to overcome it. One, I basically, given my engineering mindset, I want things to make sense. I assume, and most times it's correct, that things are done for a reason. There's insurance that's structured a certain way. There's a reason why it's done this way. You just need to understand what the reason is. So getting to the bottom of why things are done the way they're done was easy for me to learn. I had to actually, going back to my undergrad days, I had an engineering professor who said, technicians ask how, engineers ask what. So my advice, if you want to learn something and really drive things, understand why. Everything has a why. If you know why it is, then you can make changes, then you can make tweaks, then you can make improvements, and then things will make a lot more sense. If you only know how, then yes, you can execute, but it's hard for you to really get under the hood of things sometimes. But yeah, so one was understanding the why things were done in the insurance land the way they were done. Second, I wasn't afraid to ask a dumb question. I'm like, hey, I'm new to this insurance thing. Like, why is this done this way? What does this mean? How come? And I expected I'll be like, hey, Eugene, this is super simple. Yeah, we understand you're new, so we'll humor you and answer you. But what I found out that a lot of times you ask a question and, oh, that's interesting. We didn't really think of it this way. This is how it's done. We're not sure exactly why, but it's interesting that you're bringing it up. Other advice is to people that are new to something. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to ask maybe even simple questions that maybe you assume that everybody knows that there's a very straightforward answer. Maybe 9 times out of 10 there is. But there will be times where, what you bring up is actually very valuable and you have a different perspective being an outsider. So you have to leverage that. You have to capitalize on being an outsider. And so sometimes it's not a detriment. Sometimes it's actually an asset.
So you did that role for a number of years. I don't want to run out of time today. So then you're in one semiconductor company. Well, another one comes along. What was it like? Did you just love the industry? Yeah, here we go. What happened next?
Yeah, it's good to the industry. It's a very interesting industry, obviously. Semiconductors drive a lot of things that are happening right now. A lot of software is driven by the underpinning of semiconductors. But a lot of it is like, hey, Eugene's in the semiconductor world. He's a great fit for a semi company, right? So a lot of people, the recruiters target you, the outsiders look at you like, hey, you would be a great fit for this company, but you're not in this other type of industry, which to me, actually in Treasury and to all the listeners, I'd say we have to resist this to some degree because I think Treasury skills are very transferable from industry to industry. Yes, there's the industry component that's important, but there are other things that might be even more important to Treasury from transferability perspective than the industry. For example, if your company is cash rich, then the focus on is on investment. If you're cash lean, debt is more prevalent. And these are two very different things within Treasury that might impact the job a lot more than the actual industry. So we just have to be cognizant. I think the outsiders look at professionals like, you're in this industry, this is what you do. But I think for Treasury, it's a little bit different. And I think Treasury skills are very transferable. I just want to say that sometimes people might want to pigeonhole a specific industry. And that's the Treasury professional, that's, I think, is unfair. But job with Cypress was there and it was very exciting. It was, again, stepping up to a broader role, more responsibility. I gladly took it on. It was a great experience. I got to work with some great people. And then Infineon announced the acquisition of Cypress a couple of years into my job at Cypress. So that was actually a very interesting process. First, the acquisition itself was very interesting. And we closed it during COVID, when COVID just started. It was April 15th, 2020. So that in itself was a very interesting experience, trying to work through COVID and close this major deal with $10 billion acquisition. The other interesting aspect was the actual integration. I stayed for 2 years after the deal closed. First of all, I really liked Infineon, very nice company, great people. And second, there were a lot of things to do from the integration perspective. So I stayed and I integrated the Americas operations. There were other interesting projects there that were on my plate. But eventually, yeah, the center of gravity for Infineon is in Munich. So a lot of decisions, if you want to be in driver's seat, you have to be in Munich. I was in San Jose here.
Yeah.
So that was difficult.
And then, so you'd done a lot of, as I say, tech, we'd had SanDisk, we'd had these companies, and then you came along and joined Six Sense. Can you explain who Six Sense are?
Yeah, so Six Sense is a SaaS company, so software. It's a B2B software company in RevTech space. And what Six Sense does, it leverages its data, it leverages its algorithms and other cool technology, including AI, to help its customers find their next customer faster and more efficiently. So it's, if you get more precisely, it's account-based marketing niche of Rev, but there are other components as well. And it's basically helping sales teams, helping marketing teams, and helping some of their operation teams within RevTech to get their job done more efficiently, easier, and be more focused on the most promising thing.
Yeah. And so a bit of a shift for you in, as you talked about there, you have cash rich companies, you have debt laden, you have different things, but also now you've done a shift of industry. What's Treasury like there, or how does it compare, if you like, from Cypress and the things like that, stroke Infineon to yeah, quite a shift for you Treasury wise, would you say?
Yeah, it's a major shift. It's a major industry shift, which in itself, you do learn a lot. It's different and it takes time to learn things within the industry. Definitely a shift going from public companies that I've been at prior to that to a private company, to a Series E private company. Major shift because of this exponential high growth, even though growth slowed down a little bit in software, but it's still very high compared to what I've been used to in prior roles. And also because the company grew so fast, a lot of things just have not been as established as my prior roles where I came in, and Treasury might have been around for 20 years. And their processes, their policies, there are things that certain ways done. You can come in, you can look, you can improve things. Here, it's more like you build things, which is very exciting. It's not just Treasury, it's other processes too, but because A, it's new, and B, it grew so fast and it continues to grow fast, you have completely different sets of challenges. And that's challenges makes life interesting. It's getting to Treasury, you get to look at, hey, do we need to do hedging? Do we need to do investment? Do we need to do this? And you look at it and you start prioritizing and you try to say, okay, here's the benefit, here's the cost or the amount of work that's going to go into it, what's the priority. And yeah, you get on the 2 years I've been there, it was very exciting because I feel like you get to build things. It goes back to my days as an engineer with AT, build these things like, hey, I've done this project.
And just with this, and just going back to your experience, and one of the things I picked out here, and we talked about this on our pre-podcast call. So you've gone into a tech company, there's software and everything else, service and everything else. How does that feed into Treasury? We had our pre-call. So that means it's great. You can use AI to do all your Treasury for you. That's what it's like, right? That's all you do. You just sit there, feed in some algorithms to your latest AI model, whether that's Clay, whether that's ChatGPT, whatever it might be. And then you can just sit back as a treasurer. Is that right?
Yeah, no, exactly. Like,
Type of way.
yeah. Don't anybody wants to go to Treasury, don't bother. AI is going to do everything. No,
Yeah, definitely. AI does it. No, but joking
Yeah.
aside, how have you used that and leveraged that, if you like?
You know what? When it comes to AI and automation, we're definitely very focused on automation. But again, it's priorities. Automation within Treasury hasn't been the top priority. We will be getting to it.
Yeah.
But I'd say when you automate and when you invest resources, you have to consider the cost of this automation, the benefit, and it really depends on what scale you're operating at. If you're a small scale with maybe fewer entities, you can get a lot of things done in Excel up to a point. We're still fairly small where that's not hindering us.
Yeah.
At some point, it will be more efficient to do more of this automation and maybe leverage some of the systems, some of the AI. The other thing I'd say on AI, everybody's excited about it. It's a great term to throw around because people say, hey, it's just going to do everything for me. Like I said, I'm going to sit back and relax. There's things that AI can do, and there's things that AI, I don't think will be able to do, at least not in the foreseeable future. And AI is very good at automating execution, but somebody needs to set up a process. Somebody needs to know what the inputs are going to be. Somebody needs to get those inputs. Somebody needs to define what the output should be. AI, I talked about it in other forums, but I see 4 stages of most processes. First are the inputs. You have to get the data. AI will not do it for you. As a matter of fact, without data, AI is not going to do anything or will not give you any reasonable value, right? Second thing, you need to define your output. AI might be able to help you define outputs, but you're going to have to know what you want to get out of things. So you have to drive that part. Then there's the logic. How do you get from inputs to outputs? Can I help you? Maybe, but most likely not, because you know your business better than AI would. You know the drivers, you know all the dynamic, how the inputs, what the sensitivity of the inputs is. So you need to define the logic of what the system's going to do. And then the actual execution, pulling data, doing the calculations, producing outputs, all that stuff, that's what AI can do. So if you guys in the audience think that my job is going to be replaced with AI, some jobs probably will be, and in Treasury. And I think there's room for a lot of automation. So things like pulling reports and putting together cash positioning and all this stuff.
The routine crap basically goes away. And
exactly.
But as you say, but you put I know, sorry, I had this session recently with the Manufacturers Alliance and they were like, oh, what about this? I said AI and robots and bots. So I said, it's not going to replace us. It's going to make our jobs more interesting. It makes my job as a recruiter more interesting. I've automated a lot of our salary survey. But then when I want to do the analysis, I was scribbling notes here because you're exactly right. When I then had to do the input of the data, getting the data into a proper format to make it then show ChatGPT and show the engines and the automation to produce me then something that and execute and show me something that made sense to me rather than just all the numbers and everything else. Actually, this is great, but what does it mean? That's where we can extract the meaning.
Yeah. Somebody's going to have to do the thinking. Maybe at some point, AI is going to take over the world and we'll be able to think better than humans. I don't know if it's going to happen. And I don't think it's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, at least, even though there's a lot of development. I think a lot of AI hype that we're seeing is more on automating a lot of, like you said, routine tasks, that execution. It's AI can understand things better, what it's taking in and what you want it to do and how you want it to be delivered.
Don't worry, people.
Define it. Yeah.
Skynet is not here for anyone
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And if it does come, I hope I'm retired by that point.
Okay, so we're not quite at the end, but what the takeaway again we'll give the takeaways in a bit, but now looking back and you're connected to a lot of this and I'd seen you on this other thing. What with yourself and the future of Treasury, we've just touched on that, or what are the things you think you'll talk to other treasurers? You've been on a couple of panel sessions recently and various other bits. What are the things that you think other treasurers should be focusing on?
Yeah, definitely the automation piece is very important. My caution is just don't overhype it. But there's definitely opportunity to streamline things. And yes, it could potentially reduce the need for headcount, but it's the headcount more on the processing side. I also say that as much as people think things change fast, which they do, but certain things don't change. The nature of risk, I don't think changes. Maybe the drivers of risk change. There's new threats, new opportunities that come up, but the nature doesn't change. In one of the jobs of Treasury, right, it's risk management. And I'm not talking just insurance, I'm talking about risk overall, right? Whether it's FX risk, whether it's counterparty risk, whether it's interest rate risk, or whether it's some operational risk that you can transfer. That part doesn't change. Understanding how the risk impacts your business, how you can help by reducing risk in one area so your business can focus and allocate more risk in another area, that doesn't change. So when people approach Treasury and there's a lot of excitement about automation, a lot of it has to do with cash management processes. But I guess my advice and caution is just don't overlook the risk management part, because that's a big part of Treasury. And I think that's not going away by any means. And if anything, the world moves faster. There's more complexity. With more complexity, there's more risk. So we definitely need to be focused on the new threats and maybe new opportunities.
Yeah. So I'm going to see you at various conferences this year and next year and things. The takeaways for today, we're going to put your LinkedIn details in the show notes. As I said to you before, we do this as typical commuting time. So people will get some of the advice from what the moves you made. What takeaways do you have people for today?
The main takeaway is, first of all, just because you're not familiar with something or you haven't done a particular area, don't let it scare you off. Most times, again, going from A to Z is hard. Going from A to B to C or even E or D, that's very doable. So as you grow your careers, do take on new challenges, do take on new areas, even if something that you're not comfortable with. Actually, if you're not comfortable with something, it's probably a good sign to try to take it on, because that will help you grow. Other things, technology within Treasury is important. It'll play a role up to a certain point, but it does make sense to understand, learn, and master technology as much as possible, because it will change how Treasury operates. It is changing now. It will change more in the future. And third, I'd say there will be things that, and it's not just Treasury, in any profession, anything you do, sometimes things go your way, sometimes things don't go your way. You need to persevere, make sure just show up, do things, stick with it. And if you don't get the right outcome the first time, keep trying to do what you want to do, pursue your interest, pursue your passion, get more education, get more exposure to things, and just keep plodding along. Sometimes things go your way, sometimes things don't go your way, but you got to keep pushing in the long run. If you want to get somewhere, it just requires effort and this perseverance.
And reflecting back as well, just looking, you've touched on it a little bit there. You're now the treasurer at 6 cents. Was that a driver for you? You wanted to always be a treasurer? That was you getting there, or what was the sort of driver for yourself? Because I know we spoke about that before the show.
Yeah, probably a lot of folks in Treasury, you fall into Treasury or you get exposed, you love it. And that happened to me. And I've been in Treasury for a long time and I loved it. But I also wanted to experience things beyond Treasury. I had some experience with SBU Finance. I had experience or a lot of exposure to groups outside of Treasury. Especially as you get to more senior roles, you have to really know how Treasury fits in with the rest of the company. But it's also, for me, it's also good to grow and to learn new things, to get outside of Treasury a little bit. And this is what one of the excitement draws for 6 cents for me was to pick up other functions outside of Treasury and broaden my scope, broaden my horizon, and experience whether it's FinOps and maybe even some exposure in FP&A. But yeah, one thing I guess I'd say, maybe looking back at in my career, you fall into Treasury, you love it, and you tend to stay a little bit siloed within Treasury. I actually encourage folks that do fall into Treasury and fall in love with it to still go beyond Treasury and expand and maybe even take on some roles outside of Treasury, because it's gonna give you a better perspective
on the
and it's
business.
gonna make your career more interesting.
Yeah, and I remember that was why I was coming back to it, because I remember we talked about it. Treasury is part of the company. It's not just Treasury
Exactly.
as a silo. Amazing. Eugene, thank you very much for your time today. You've been great. Thank you very much, sir.
It was great. I really appreciate it.
Great stuff.
Looking forward to connecting in the future.
See you soon. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Care.
So I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast as much as we did making it. If you are one of our listeners, please let me know. Give us a thumbs up on LinkedIn or wherever you might listen to the podcast. But also, I'd love to give some shout outs at some stage. It's something I wanted to do a few times. So please let me know you're listening. Sometimes we record them. We have amazing guests, but I don't know you are listening to us. You are hearing us. Where are you listening to us? Are you walking along the beach or on your commute to work? It's amazing when I do get feedback. So we've got some amazing other events and guests coming up on the show. So we've had Treasury Career Corner Live month, which was amazing. Then we've got a series of great guests: Stephanie Custer, Greg Packard, James Kelly, Dave Cable, the Guayo brothers, Eugene Spevakov, and a number of others coming up. So we're also got then the live sessions recorded throughout the rest of the year. We're going to be doing it in Dublin, in New York. Then we're going to be doing some other events, maybe Eurofinance. We're going to head off across back to London as well. So yeah, we'll see you at one of those. So, but as always, this podcast is supported by the Treasury Recruitment Company. So go to treasuryrecruitment.com. If you're looking to recruit, call us. If you're looking to find your next role, call us. If you're looking to benchmark your salary, go to treasurysalary.com. That's all we do. For recruitment needs, for the US, you can go to Joe Grabowski, supported by me, Mike Richards, Joe at treasuryrecruitment.com. Katie, who supports us across Europe, KATIE at treasuryrecruitment.com. And me, Mike Richards, Mike at treasuryrecruitment.com. As I say, we've got lots more trips. We've done New York, Texas, London, Chicago, Greece. Coming up, we've got Dublin, New York, yes, twice, we've got two of them. AFP, Nashville. We've got the UK. We've got other events coming up. I can't wait. So keep an eye on our events page and everything else. Do the salary survey. We've got over 1,200 people doing it now. We're going to run our next set of results at the end of Q3 just in time for Eurofinance, actually, in Copenhagen. So looking forward to that. But if you need us, reach out. If you want to connect, just drop me an email, Mike at treasuryrecruitment.com, or find me on LinkedIn, and look forward to the next podcast and seeing you soon at a conference. All right. Many thanks.